Supervisor Bronson?
Here.
Supervisor Christie? Here. Supervisor Miller?
Here.
Supervisor Valadez?
Present.
Chairman Elias?
Presente, I'm present.
Let the record reflect that all members are present. Supervisor Miller and Supervisor Bronson are participating telephonically.
Thank you, Julie. I'm going to take a moment of personal privilege before we start the meeting and stop for a second to recognize the passing of Christopher Cole, who was an interesting fellow who came here quite often to almost every single board meeting and always offered comments during the call to the audience. He passed away rather unexpectedly last week. He was a member of the congregation over at Grace St. Paul over there in Midtown. I very rarely agreed with Mr. Cole, but he certainly he certainly cared a lot about all of us, and he made every effort to let people know how much he did care. And so with that, before Supervisor Christie leads us in the Pledge of Allegiance, I'm going to ask those of us who can stand to please stand and offer a moment of silence in his memory. Supervisor Christie.
Please join me in the pledge to our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, this is a special meeting. We only have one item on the agenda of business. We also are going to have call to the public. But this has been a very contentious issue in our community. So it's extra critical to me today that we all be respectful of each other and follow the rules of the room, which are to please not shout out from your seat. Do not say anything vulgar while you're giving your comments during call to the audience. And especially do not get abusive with other people in the room, or I will ask you to be removed. Those are the rules. But I'm asking us to go a little further than that today. I'm asking everybody to go a little further than that today and to please try and extra hard to be respectful and kind and polite about this issue, because I know we all care very deeply about it, and we care very deeply for people who come to our communities, and we also care very deeply about the values that we hold, and all those things intersect on this particular issue and make it difficult at best for all of us to keep our emotions in check. But I'm asking everybody to please do that today out of respect for this body and out of respect for each other, more importantly. Maybe most importantly of all is out of respect for our community, because we still all will share that community no matter what happens here today. So we have probably about 30 cards that have been, 33 cards that have been submitted at this point. That's a huge number. My sense is that we're going to go through call to the audience for about an hour and a half. Then we'll go ahead and hear the item. Anybody who was not heard can remain and be heard after the item is done. We'll complete call to the audience. But we're going to have about an hour and a half of call to the audience. Is that all right with the board members? That way we all know what we're dealing with, and I think we all know the issue. So along those lines, I'm asking everybody to please be quick, be efficient, don't be repetitive. You know, make it quick so that we can hear as many people as we can in that hour and a half. And if you don't have a lot to say, just don't rant on. Let us know what you think, and then be seated. You know, it would just be helpful to everybody and make it so that as many people as can are able to speak in this first hour and a half. Very important to us all. Any other comments anybody wants to make before we get started and call to the audience? Very well. Then our first speaker is going to be Janet Marcotte. Janet, thank you for being here. Appreciate your always being interested in community.
Thank you.
And could you please give us your name for the record?
Um,
And you have 3 minutes to address the Board of Supervisors.
My name is Janet Marcotte, resident of District 1, retired now, but served as the director of the YWCA Tucson for more than 25 years. I'm here urging your support for the new location for repurposing a county building for the new location for the migrant shelter. But I'd like to address something that's been mostly missing, I think, from this debate. Our community can be proud of the fact that we are no longer unnecessarily detaining 300 juveniles a day in our juvenile court system. So by reducing the juvenile population from 300 a day to 30, we have eliminated a whopping 98,550 bed nights for incarcerated youth in our community. So it's actually that advancement in social and racial justice that makes this building available. I think that this location may not be ideal, but I am confident that we can create a welcoming environment through friendly volunteers and an orderly, reliable system for helping migrants locate sponsors and securing transportation during the 2 days they will be in our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Janet. Appreciate you being brief, too. Our next speaker is going to be Joe Bogart. Please, sir, come forward, give us your name for the record. Thank you for being here, and you have 3 minutes to address the Board of Supervisors.
My name is Joe Bogart, and I'm a resident of Marana. Also, I'm on the Bond Advisory Committee. These are my personal views on this. I can't really support this type of a project, especially on an emergency basis, when the 4 corners haven't been nailed down. We haven't actually identified and received the funding that's going to be required for this. So I don't think that the taxpayers of Pima County or the residents of Pima County should be on the hook for this if funding doesn't come through. So we are making a commitment of $100 a year for a facility. That's the second thing I have here. There are similar humanitarian organizations that do pay for, similar organizations that do pay for their facilities. And what I have derived is it's about $200,000 a year for a similar facility. So I'm not sure that the taxpayers of Pima County don't deserve to have a fair value for their buildings. And the next thing is about health care. I don't think that what's in the what has been estimated is accurate. I divide that by the 270. Now these are transitory residents. It's not the same 250. Most of these kids that are going to be there haven't seen a health professional until they came to the border. So I don't see how we're going to provide them with health care at 1/5 what the government estimates that it costs to provide me with health care when I've had it all my life. So, and then especially my concern again is that the funding hasn't been nailed down, and I don't think that we should proceed with this until it is. I appreciate the time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Just for clarification purposes, that $100 a year has been eliminated as this is no longer a lease but an operating agreement, and so it's not appropriate to charge that $100 and imply that it's for rent for that building. More on that later. I'm sure Mr. Huckleberry have a comment. I just wanted to clarify that for correct purposes here. Stephen Thompson is our next speaker, please. Thank you for being here, sir.
Thank you.
You have 3 minutes to address the board after you give us your name for the record.
My name is Stephen Thompson. I'm a physician. My wife is also a physician, and I have volunteered and provided medical services at the present monastery location
Thank you.
for the last 5 months. We both enthusiastically support the move of the Casa Alitas organization to the new structure, although we both agree it's less than perfect. And the medical community that's involved with the care of migrants in the monastery also supports this move overwhelmingly. There's a practical reason for this. The care that's provided is all done by volunteers. The supplies, the cost of equipment and other items is all provided at no cost to the county or anyone other than the people who contribute those supplies and services. And they're fairly extensive and work well because of the centralized location. All of the migrants are screened, including half of the migrants who are children. They're treated for any of the illnesses they've acquired in their travels, for the injuries they may have sustained, and are followed at the location until they're safe and healthy enough to travel. They're also welcome to walk in and receive medical care at no cost, as long as there's someone in the medical area, which is usually 8 or 10 hours a day. Distributing this health care to other locations, even temporarily, would be extremely disruptive to the process and make it essentially impossible to achieve to the level that it's being provided at this point. So I would strongly urge the supervisors to approve this resolution and proceed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your dedication to helping folks too. That's very important and means a lot to all of us. Next speaker is going to be Ryan Kelly. Mr. Kelly, thank you for being here. It's good to see you. Please give me your name for the record, and then you have 3 minutes to address the board, please.
Yeah, my name is Ryan Kelly, and I live in District 1. There's a lot of speakers and a lot of familiar faces I see here this morning that are going to speak to some of these issues much better than I can. I just want to take a quick opportunity and a moment to reflect on how uniquely American it is in 2019 that we will be likely looking to a detention center for temporary housing. That's an indictment, if you ask me. Also, and this is really the way I want to approach this morning, is something to consider here. And we all know that so many of the community members have fought for quite some time now about Stone Garden funding. And, you know, there was humanitarian aid funding attached this last go-around, which unfortunately made it palatable to some of our supervisors to approve that funding. And I fear the entrenchment of what this does. This is a crisis that's not going away anytime soon. It's going to require a federal response. And to even think of a federal response in this moment in time is terrifying, and we're seeing that in real time. But how do we undo this? There are so many programs that have been proposed that would be transformative to our community that the county has balked on for fear of funding. But to attach humanitarian aid via Stone Garden to a service like this, which I understand is important, and this is a crisis of the moment. This is a long-term crisis. It's not going away. And to link Stone Garden with that, I know, Supervisor Elias, how much you adamantly oppose Stone Garden, and Supervisor Valadez as well. Good luck undoing that if we accept this location, this form of humanitarian aid, which is inextricably linked to the continued collaboration of our county law enforcement to oppress people of color and the undocumented community in our county. So please consider that, and I oppose this. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Okay, our next speaker is going to be Valerie James. Thank you for being here. You have 3 minutes to address the board. Please give us your name for the record.
Thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm from Ward 6. I've been volunteering with Casalita since last year, and I want to speak to the power of transformation. I've seen phenomenal, really creative responses on every level that Casalitas is able to pull off in the middle of an inconceivable situation. And I've seen just in my time at Casalitas the power of creativity with the kids. And I fully believe that in moving to this facility, we're part of transforming what has been this juvenile detention facility in the past, that we have the power to do that. And anything else is really kind of a failure of imagination. I believe we can do anything we set our minds to. I think it's also an incredible opportunity for grace. I know there's a lot of conflict here, and yet we have this opportunity to come together and work together. But I think that communication is going to be the most important thing of all. I just want to say I really urge support for this move. We need it. We can move mountains. The creativity that's expressed by the volunteers and the staff at Casalitas is incredible. I've never seen it in my 65 years. So I just trust that we will continue in that vein. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is going to be Peg Harmon. Peg, thank you for being here. Appreciate it. It's always good to see you.
No, thank you.
3 minutes, and you got to give us your name, though.
Yes, my formal name is Marguerite, but everybody knows me as Peg Harmon, and I am the CEO of Catholic Community Services. And you've received lots of information about the details of the work that we hope to accomplish. I'm just going to add a couple of bullet points beyond that. The need for this facility has already been demonstrated. We probably have assisted 20,000 people this past year, and we've been doing this work since 2014. We've made mistakes along the way, and we hope we have learned from the errors that we made and hope that we can apply that learning and that knowledge to this situation. We have completed due diligence to comply with recognized standards of shelter care, and there are recognized national standards. And as we visited and evaluated 25 different locations since April 21st, we have been using those standards to establish whether or not the next location we occupy will work. We also are committed to responding to the concerns expressed by people we assist. Although we speak of the former monastery as this wonderful symbolic place, there are in fact people who arrived at the monastery and were quite afraid to remain there. And we never forced a person to remain in a place that they were uncomfortable. We always found another option for them. And their reasons were their reasons, but that wasn't for us to ask. We moved people on. We've also heard the voices of those in the community who believe that asylum seekers may not wish to remain at the Casalitas facility after they arrive. Like our practice at the monastery, we commit to relocating them to whatever alternatives we've identified. We have asked that the consulate from Guatemala, the individual in our community who's responsible for the rights of the citizens in the three-nation cooperative agreement, to continue to meet and interview our guests as part of the regular Know Your Rights orientation that is part of the work that we do at Casalitas. We believe that this external presence at the facility will ensure that our guests, if they have a concern, will be able to express that concern, not to staff or volunteers who are operating the facility. I've also heard the concerns of those in the community who believe that the look of the facility will create traumatic memories. And it has been the practice of Casalitas, as you already know, volunteers, medical volunteers who understand the concerns and identify those issues will be assessing the guests. And again, if people have discomfort if they're not able to remain because they see the facility in a way that we don't believe it's being presented, they will have the opportunity to remove. We request that the county officials and other interested people in the community do a look behind with us. It's something that we commonly do in our work. We make a decision, we move forward, we work on that decision, we evaluate the decision to determine whether or not we've met the goals and objectives and the care and concern we hope for. So the work will continue, and I'm reminded of Isaiah and the word of transformation. I believe in the power of transformation. Then he will judge between the nations and arbitrate for many. They will beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. And this isn't our opportunity to transform. I urge your support. Thank you.
Our next speaker is going to be Lola Rainey. Lola, thank you for being here. Appreciate it. And please give us your name for the record, and you have 3 minutes to address the board.
Yes, my name is Lola Rainey. I'm with the Tucson Second Chance Community Bail Fund and Black Lives Matter. I actually hadn't planned to speak, but here I am. I'm a freedom lover. And I don't think that no matter how nicely we try to position this, that we can take away from the fact that we're putting people who've been traumatized into a facility that is actively being used as a detention center for kids who shouldn't be caged in the first place. And that doesn't change if you put a mural on the wall or you put carpet or you take the locks off the doors. And when I think of what Tucson is, I think of Tucson as a city with a heart. And this does not reflect the best of what we can do and who we are. And that there's sort of a cynicism that's reflected in the fact that you're going to use Stone Garden funds to try to cover the cost of this. We are a poor community. The amount of money that you have earmarked for this could be used in so many other ways to reduce the poverty and other issues that we have in our community, not just for migrant families who are transiting through our communities, but for the people who live year-round. The lack of vision, the lack of leadership, the lack of true compassion is what is most disturbing by this proposal. And I think people around the country are going to look at our community and say, who are we? That we have so little faith that we would propose something like this, and that you're going to vote on it today. But the good news to me is that there are people here who are going to resist this. And I do believe that freedom lovers, including the migrant families, are not going to want to stay there. And I'm glad to hear that. If they ask not to stay, they'll give an opportunity to leave. So that means there's an opportunity for us to come up with other solutions, other alternatives, because when that facility is sitting empty, then maybe you'll have your answer. That people want to be free. They don't want to be contained. Thank you.
Thank you, Lola. Next speaker is going to be Gretchen Lopez. Gretchen, please come forward. Give us your name for the record. You have 3 minutes to address the board.
Hi, my name is Gretchen Lopez, and I have been a part of the community's response to working with these families for going on 2.5 years now. I am the site coordinator at the Inn, which is a shelter that runs under the Methodist Church. And we have, I believe, shown again and again that this community is here to respond and to receive these families. I feel it's a false narrative that the options are to approve this space or they will be on the streets. On Palm Sunday, I received a call that over 130 of these migrant brothers and sisters of ours had been released to the streets. And within 30 minutes, we were there with water, with what they needed, receiving them and finding locations for them. And within 2 hours, we were able to have new churches that had not received families before step up and receive those families. By dinner time, everybody was in a safe space with what they needed to have those immediate needs met in an appropriate and kind and radical hospitality way that is Tucson, that is our community, that in this decision was not given the chance to step up and meet that. it shouldn't be the county's responsibility or the county's money's responsibility to care for these families. When there is a community here that will step up, that will donate money, that will donate the items that are needed to care for these families. When we receive them, they are scared, they are hungry, they are tired. They don't even know that they can trust us. And at the shelters that I have been a part of, we receive them at a church, where when they get out of those ICE buses or those ICE vans, they see a church there. And even in that time, in that transition for them, I, not being someone who's ever been under someone else's control before, I can't exactly know or understand what that transition is, to be in someone's control, to then be being released and told you're free. And even in the church setting, sometimes that is really hard for them to receive. So if they are being released and being assigned a tiny concrete cell with their children, I feel that that will be detrimental to them and not aid in this loving humanitarian hospitality way that we as Tucson can and will respond. And with a no vote, it does not mean the families will go to the streets. Tucson will not let that happen. I will not let that happen. The faith community will not let that happen. So please, I urge a no in this vote.
Our next speaker is going to be Margie King. I can appreciate everybody's deep felt feelings about all of this, but the more we clap, the less time people are going to have for people to be able to speak. So just a thought, just so you know. Please, thank you for being here. You have 3 minutes to address the Board of Supervisors, and please give us your name for the record.
Yes. My name is Margie King. I'm a member of Grace St. Paul Church's Migrant Ministry. I've been involved in helping migrants since 2011 at the bus station, before any of the shelters were in effect. Much of what I had hoped to say today, others have already said, and I don't want to belabor the point. Other things that I had planned to say, I think are best shared with the opposition, some of whom are dear friends of mine. My concern is that I don't want this disagreement to rip this community apart. We are all pro-migrant. There are anti-migrant forces out there. Please, let's not inadvertently, through our own disagreements, allow those forces to do harm to the migrants in any way. I do want to respond to the Palm Sunday incident. It was wonderful that so many churches and the Campus Christian Center stepped up. The Episcopals at the Campus Christian Center were having a Palm Sunday service, and they invited the migrants to join them. I embrace that. However, those migrants the following day had to go to the monastery for their intake, for their transportation needs, and for their medical needs. We need each other. All of the churches and the monastery, or now wherever CCS moves to, we need each other. We need to work together. We need to have bonds of affection and respect. Thank you.
Our next speaker is going to be Chris King. Mr. King, please step forward. Give us your name for the record. You have 3 minutes to address the board. Mr. King will be followed by Jerry Ottavani and Laura Fairbanks, just so you know, so you can get ready to come up quickly.
Good morning, Supervisors. Thank you for giving us a little bit of time for Mr. Cole, who passed away this past week. That was very honorable of you.
Crazy things happen.
I was kind of surprised. So
I thought you might be, sir.
But I'm not. Hasn't been the first time. So, morning, Supervisors. I'm Chris King, citizen and taxpayer, and I'm here to speak to the issue of county finances regarding the conversion of the juvenile detention facility. Many of the speakers here today have addressed the issue of compassion. I agree. Where is the compassion for the citizens of Pima County? Where is the compassion for the taxpayers? Your compassion comes from extortion of those who pay taxes so you can feel good. Taxpayers be damned. 2 weeks ago, you sat here as a board to pass the county budget, yet instead of addressing the issue then, you call for a special meeting to address it. Where's the money coming from? Taxpayers should not be on the hook for it, as you've heard from several speakers already. In January 2019, President Trump declared an emergency at the U.S.-Mexico border. You continued your mission of rejecting anything he proposed, including passing no less than 2 resolutions against this administration. Furthermore, why are you even bothering to hold this charade of a meeting when work has already begun in converting the juvenile detention facility? This tells me the Administrator Huckleberry does what he wants first and asks permission only after to be granted after the fact. CCS is a charitable organization and should still be treated as such. You, the government, should not be picking the winners and losers in regards to charities. The county should not be on the hook for feeding the volunteers and the employees of CCS. Lastly, before the approval of any agreement on behalf of the county, all of the associated costs should be made available to the public instead of leaving vague projects out there with no oversight. Thank you.
Our next speaker is going to be Jerry Ottavani. Laura, you're going to be next. So. And after Laura will be Lori Melrue. Jerry, please, you have 3 minutes to address the board after giving us your name for the record.
Good morning, Supervisor Elias and Board Supervisor. My name is Jerry Ottavani, and I live in Oro Valley. Well, Mr. Huckleberry, it's amazing what you learn on the radio and on the media as well. Supposedly, there's a chance that you might be taxing the people of Pima County again for this project. You're putting some seniors out of their homes. Ali Miller came out with a good idea how to not tax again and again and again and again. You might be taxing the people again for this particular project. Mr. Huckleberry, you're the second highest paid in the United States with approximately $460,000, including benefits, with only approximately 1 million people, and the 5th poorest city in the United States. The administrator of LA only makes $20,000 more than you do, and he has 11 million people. So sad that Mr. Huckleberry seems to be able to only tax. He only knows how to tax. Perhaps what we need is a new and younger and smarter administrator, because he's getting too old to know how to not tax the people and finding other means of raising money. Thank you.
Our next speaker is going to be Laura Fairbanks. Laura, please come forward. Thank you for being here today. It's nice to see you. You have 3 minutes to address the board after giving your name for the record.
My name is Laura Hagan Fairbanks, and I too am a citizen and a taxpayer. I'm also a firm believer in the separation of church and state, although I will tell you that my Catholic faith informs my views, which in turn inform how I vote. I believe that all members of this board identify as Christians, but Christians do not have the mark on decency. Many Christian and non-Christian members of this community support this agreement. Why? Because humanitarian aid is the right thing to do, regardless of religion, religious identification, or lack of religious belief. Pima County can and should set a standard for humane treatment in support of people who are seeking asylum. I first volunteered with Casa Salitas when ICE asked for their assistance and began bringing groups of refugees to St. Pius Church. I also volunteered at the monastery. I have met families who are fleeing for their lives with their children in tow. Most have been traumatized during their journey. You can often see it in their eyes, but in those same eyes you can see resilience and gratitude. Why do I volunteer and why do I support this agreement? Because of what Jesus said. Christ said that if I feed the hungry, clothe the naked, give drink to the thirsty, welcome the stranger, and visit the imprisoned or sick, that I have done these things for Jesus himself. Christ said that, and I believe him. Do you? We can make a difference in the lives of the exhausted and weary travelers who find their way to our community. The structure in which our refugee guests are staying is not what is important in this situation. What counts is the warmth, care, and love shown by the volunteers who believe in welcoming the stranger. You will find that warmth, care, and love in great abundance on any day you step into the monastery. That is what is most important in supporting and assisting refugees on their journeys to loved ones in other areas of our nation. It does not matter what this space was supposed to be. It only matters that it will be transformed into a safe and caring refuge on a long and arduous journey. I respectfully request that the Board of Supervisors approve this agreement. This vote will be a direct reflection on our community. We can be seen as a compassionate and caring community, or we can be seen as a callous and heartless place where we prefer that desperate and tired and confused people who do not know our language are left to fend for themselves. I respectfully ask that you do the right thing and approve this agreement. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is going to be John Backer. Oh, I'm sorry. John, hang on a minute. You'll be next. Lori Melrose. I'm sorry. Then it'll be John Backer, and then it'll be Blake Gentry. So I'm sorry. I apologize.
It's okay. Good morning to the supervisors, and thank you very much for making it possible for the community to respond here. My name is Lori Melrude. I'm a social worker that works with immigrant families, particularly families separated due to immigration enforcement. I volunteered with Casa Mariposa at the Greyhound station for 4 years, and we also took many immigrants into our home. Immigrants and refugees have been part of my personal and work life for as long as I can remember. My own family were refugees escaping the pogroms against Jews in the early 1920s in the place that they called home for 400 years. I think that many in this room today are drawn to this work, whether via strong advocacy, human rights, humanitarian aid, or opposition to the huge private prison industry. We know that the highly sophisticated and widespread carceral practice that have ensnared our own young people and destroyed their futures are now spreading like a cancer over the last few decades to trap and persecute immigrants seeking safety here. At any given moment, there are, as I think you all know, 54,000 immigrants in this present year are sitting in over 255 detention centers, and the vast majority of those owned by private corporations. I'm troubled that funding and ending of the generous gift of the Benedictine convent has now brought us together in a somewhat adversarial situation where we are putting immigrants in transition from the Benedictine convent to the former wings of a detention facility. I am troubled, but I am not opposed. If there were a facility and funding combination available from another source for a centralized hospitality center, I think, like many others who volunteer at the monastery, we would prefer that immigrants be housed in that alternative, but that is not the case at this time. It's possible that in the future, with all of the enthusiasm of this amazing community, that there will be an alternative site in the future, and we will all look forward to that time. Again, we're not at that time. In the meantime, I've talked to many recently arrived immigrants, and their main concern continues to be, how do I get to my family, and how soon before I can get my bus tickets? That's really the bottom line. They have had a nightmare here. Everything is stressful until they visualize that reunification can happen for them. They also need to eat and drink, receive medical attention, and have beds, toilets, and showers. The majority have had none of those life-preserving things while in Border Patrol detention, and some will not have had those things, not just for days, but for weeks. I don't pretend to speak for the best interests of the immigrants. My role as a social worker and organizer is to accompany them, but not to speak for them or make assumptions on their behalf unless they ask me to, because they are not voiceless by any means. At the stage where they are about to transition to get on the bus or the plane away from the nightmare of the borderlands, which is the very stage at which we receive them, we can offer a few things. We can offer... Oh, no. I've never done that before. Okay, I just want to say the last sentence, which is, I see us taking down 3 wings of a detention center that formerly housed 300 to 350 youth, and now will never be able to house even half that number in that facility. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is John Becker. Blake, you're going to follow that, and then Cora Cole.
Hi, my name is John Backer, candidate for Board of Supervisors for District 4 and Pima County resident. I wasn't planning on speaking today, but I was kind of amazed at some who came before me. I think what we're widely seeing here is left, right, Republican, and Democrat all uniting against this project. Sure, we have compassion in this country. We've given money around the world. We've left our sons and daughters around the world, spilled their blood. And I think that it's wrong to take these folks that have gone through borders of entry, been approved by the federal government to have asylum. Well, it's the government that's making that decision. It should be the government that supports that decision with the money that's needed. So I think that how are we going to look at the people in need here, many of which, if not most of which, have been taxpayers, and turn our back on the local people who are homeless, that have problems that our money could go towards instead of those immigrants. So I think it's wrong to move forward with this project and not know a true cost to it and say that we're going to go after grant money with no guarantee we'll get it, when we have so many desperate needs here for our residents and people who have paid into this. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Blake Gentry, please come forward. Thank you for being here, sir. You have 3 minutes to address the board after you give us your name for the record.
Osio Ani Chukchon. My name is Blake Gentry. My Cherokee family have been peoples of color since before the founding of the United States and the founding of Mexico. Every member of the Cherokee Nation is a survivor of both voluntary and forced migration. Forced migration at the hands of the federal government by executive order on the Trail of Tears. I'm in favor of a public shelter that provides temporary respite to immigrants and refugees because I have aided both undocumented and documented immigrants for the past 38 years in Wisconsin, Texas, Arizona, and in Mexico. I requested as a volunteer and was given space to establish an independent indigenous language office to facilitate interpretation for indigenous language speaking immigrants at the Tucson Monastery under this elitist program. I've trained volunteers in the intake process there, also at the Methodist shelter, and as a community member of the former Casa Mariposa, which asked Catholic Community Services to take over sheltering immigrants in 2014 at the height of a surge of immigrants at the Texas and Arizona border. I've seen the cells in the Youth Detention Center before this offer Consider Now, and I've seen the plans and the actual cells themselves. I find its capacity to house immigrants and provide services they need for their continued journey outweighs the legitimate concerns about traumatization, a concern which I share. I'm deeply aware of those conditions of what provokes trauma, having written a report, Deprivation, Not Deterrence, a second separate technical report on exclusion of indigenous languages in short-term detention, and for 25 years of co-led an acupuncture training project in Petén, Guatemala to relieve trauma. Comparing long-term and short-term detention with the Juvenile Detention Center, while categorically similar, is misleading and misguided. What we do is more important than the architecture itself. Elitis has allowed acupuncture treatments for immigrants in shelter, and such treatments help reduce trauma. I would have preferred a less institutional training as well, but the monastery itself was once an institution. What is not an institution is a motel that we've had to use several times late at night next to Highway I-10, which requires a locked gate, and its layout diminishes our ability to provide all services despite the fact we had additional churches helping us. Every church is an institution. They all have their limitations. They need to be able to provide shelter and showers, as do several schools that were visited as potential sites. We need a large enough facility to meet two critical needs. One is to receive the highly vacillating number of immigrants released on a daily basis. The other is enough volunteers to pull off that operation. Elitis, while not perfect, has prove beyond a reasonable doubt it has enough volunteers. The churches that have worked with it should continue to provide shelter in their churches in cooperation with Elitas and support this effort, which has been community-based from the very beginning. I'm not Catholic, even though I work as a volunteer at Catholic Community Services. Every institution has its administrative limitations, but I found a fair process for airing grievances or disagreements has always been the general rule of thumb for Elitas operations. Those who protest this decision are invited by me to seek out and to look at the work of the Indigenous Language Office and to work with us so that we can protect language rights.
You've used up all your time, sir. We need you to complete it very quickly.
In public spaces where that is not happening, we have more in common than in opposition. I urge the supervisors to vote yes.
Thank you, sir. Okay, Cora Cole. To be followed by Dion Heimnick and Gwen Rusky. Please your name for the record, and you have 3 minutes, and thank you for being here today.
Good morning, supervisors and community members. My name is Cora Cole, and this is my first time speaking at one of your meetings. I moved to Pima County fairly recently, but I grew up in Walla Walla, Washington. In matters of what's best for this community and your relationship with migrants, I am not authorized to speak. But in terms of shelter and carceral facilities, I think I am, and so I'm offering that perspective. On the top of it, I want to offer support to Ms. Rainey and some of the other speakers who have talked about questions of facilities use and the way that this functions as an extension of the use of the humanitarian aid portion of the Stone Garden funds. And I understand that this is a potential transformation of space and that we need better plumbing. And community mutual aid is essential for all of this. I'm not making a statement of equivalence between folks who are currently homeless and those who are currently transitioning nations, but in terms of shelter supports, the needs are similar. Basic amenities, heat and air conditioning, safety. In 2017, Walla Walla had a really bad winter, and a bunch of small-scale religious leaders formed a coalition and sleep center at a local golf course for our homeless community. It was much needed, and the number of deaths during that winter went way down. Folks were safe there, but in the spring, local business owners made demands that the shelter move. So the city moved it to a downtown space between the sheriff's office and the town jail. It was on city property, there were amenity hookups, and the golf course made money again. But people were on edge, conflict was high, and in late 2018, a man was shot and killed on the property. The number of guards patrolling the center did not help. They have frequently placed tenants in danger instead of being of use. After the shooting, local business owners again became frustrated with the impact on business, and earlier this year, the shelter was moved to the Washington State Penitentiary. Even for those who have never been incarcerated or who have been protected to some extent by ICE, being intimately in close contact with detention facilities is unsettling at best, and in situations of temporary housing, it has led to more people staying on the streets to avoid the sleep center at the penitentiary and to more violence both at the center between guests and the guards that are constantly on the grounds. This move that you're proposing is dangerous. It may make guests feel less safe. It will re-traumatize those who have been in some kind of incarcerated system before, and it can be done better. Solving these problems before there is a body count is cheaper for the taxpayers, long run, and it will prevent refugees from feeling that they are safer on the streets. I respect your decision and appreciate the support you offer to the immigrant community. Thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you. Dion Heimnick. Sorry about that, sir. Appreciate you being here. 3 minutes. Please give us your name for the record, sir.
My name is Dion Heiming Sr. I'm a resident and taxpayer of Pima County. I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak for you here today. I'm concerned about some of the itemized costs that were listed in this endeavor to use this juvenile detention center, okay, to house migrant asylees. First and foremost, the health care costs. Okay, I work in healthcare. I've taken care of many people who have trekked, from those South American states up to the United States seeking a better life, and I appreciate that. But those people who come into our community with infectious or communicable diseases, or women who may be pregnant, you're going to see those healthcare costs skyrocket. Okay, I don't believe that Pima County taxpayer money should be used for this facility, or monies from Operation Stone Garden diverted to this endeavor. If this detention facility is the county's only or best option to house these individuals while they stay in our community, so be it. But secure the funding from the federal government first, rather than have the taxpayers of Pima County be on the hook for this monies, all right, to take care of these people in a compassionate way, because I don't feel that we should have to foot the bill for this. And so I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next speaker is going to be Gwen Rusky. Thank you. Please come forward and give us your name for the record. You have 3 minutes to address the Board of Supervisors. Also, I'd ask everybody to speak up a little bit. Some of the folks on the phones are saying that it's hard to hear. So please use your outside voice and be loud like Richard. My mother used to call me the loud one. So
I'm not sure if I have an outdoor voice. My name is Gwen Roski, and I'm a member of St. Mark's Presbyterian Church. We've been involved in working with the monastery since it opened in the fall, and the experience has been a pretty amazing experience for all of us involved. And I have enormous respect and appreciation for what the Catholic Social Services has done. The monastery has been an absolute blessing. I think listening to everybody that spoke before me, I could go and sit down because I really don't know anymore quite where I stand. There's such good arguments on both sides. It really bothers me. I thought we were going into a former detention center, and I found out when I came back from vacation and I took a road trip and drove down there, and it's an existing detention center. They're still housing people there. And so we're going to have the migrants in one half and youth in the other side, detention youth, and they're good, I find it a disturbing thing. When they come to St. Mark's or to other churches or the monastery, they're in more of a home-like atmosphere. We have table fellowship. We eat together. The people watch TV from a couch. The migrants help us cook in the kitchen, and we're going to lose that whole thing. My concern is by putting it into the detention center, it's going to institutionalize, not just the daily thing, because I think you can make a place welcoming, but the prospect of putting that much money into this place, will it ever go away? Will we ever get back to the community support? The monastery gave us so much visibility. It was in the paper just about every day. There was something about this. Putting it over to the detention center, it's just going to, I don't know, is it going to normalize it? Is it going to lower the conversation that's going on amongst the community? There's so many people that have learned so much by this experience, and it's going to be shut back. Where do we go from here? What does it do to the conversation for the whole reforming the whole system? It closes the conversation down to put it back into a closed box like the monastery. So I think, close like the detention center, as opposed to such a highly visible, chaotic at times place at the monastery. Part of it is I'm going to miss what we had there. I hope we can replicate it because I don't see how the decision is anything but to go ahead. But I hope we can make it a short-term decision instead of signing on for a lifetime of housing people at the detention center. It just breaks my heart.
You spent all
Thank
your
you.
time. Thank you very much. Appreciate you being here. Next speaker is going to be Randy Gaines, followed by Reverend Michael Lonigan and Rachel Sedgwick. Please give us your name for the record, and you have 3 minutes to address the Board of Supervisors. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Randy Gaines. I've been a resident of Tucson since 1958. I was raised here. I spent 7 years in Nogales. I was the director of the County Planning and Zoning Department, and I attended over 100 Board of Supervisors meetings. I've not been to one now in 40 years, and I can't say I miss it. Mr. Huckleberry, I sympathize with you because, unfortunately, I couldn't talk the board into giving me the same salary you have, but I know you have to put up with a lot of stuff. So I really have 4 things I'd like to speak with you about. The first is we can do better in our community than putting children in a prison. No matter how you disguise it, it's still a prison. Next door, they're prisoners. There are sirens there. There are police cars there. It's scary. I'd also like to correct a couple things we've heard this morning. One was that on Palm Sunday, that there was no room to send asylum seekers other than back to Alitas. The Methodist Church End Project, we now call it the End, that Gretchen spoke about, was ready to take them. When they were overflowed, we had other Methodist churches, including mine, in a matter of 2 hours, arranged for care for those migrants for 4 days. Food, clothes, everything that they needed. So I'd just like to say that. I'd also like to thank you, Chairman, for your opening remarks. We're on the same page. You know, I've been for just a year transporting these people, these asylum seekers, to the bus depot. And since I speak Spanish, I've been able to explain tickets. And a bus ticket, believe it or not, is much more complicated than an airplane ticket. When you open it up, it might go to the floor. It's like there's so many pages to it. And every time there's a bus change, it has to be explained. And to the asylum seekers, many, maybe a 4th or a 5th, are illiterate. So I've been able to help those volunteers from Casa Alitas to understand the migrants' responsibilities. So we're on the same page. We don't have to fight or say bad things about each other. We want to solve this problem. So I'd like to say that the Catholic Church in Casa Alitas is not the only show in town. Recently, I've been told that the Border Patrol is no longer bringing these asylum seekers to the end, even though we started in 2006 and have been in operation continuously. And it's a happy place near the main gate. I've got 5 seconds left. Well,
Actually, please complete your comments very quickly, sir.
Okay.
I appreciate your patience, though.
Okay. I just hope that you'll listen to psychologists who say that when the children are traumatized, it hurts them for the rest of their lives. And I can back that up with studies if I had time.
Thank you. Next speaker is going to be Michael Lonigan. Reverend Lonigan, please give us your name for the record. You have 3 minutes.
Good morning. My name is Reverend Michael Lonergan. I'm pastor of the Church of the Painted Hills, UCC in Tucson. And as a volunteer in ministry to asylum seekers, I have served at the shelters at Rincon UCC, the Super Inn, the Marillac House, and at the monastery. I speak today in support of the item before you for 2 reasons. In the fall of 2018, when Rincon UCC operated a shelter during October and November, I had the opportunity to fill in as the contact person between Casa Alitas and Rincon, while the regular contact person was away. During that 10-day period, I would have an early morning, somewhere between 6 and 6:30, text message conversation with Teresa Cavendish. That would be followed up by other communications throughout the day, some late in the afternoon. And that was every day, not just Monday through Friday. I've arrived for my overnight shift at the monastery around 7:30, and Teresa was there. And the next morning was on the phone with her before 7 a.m. In the same way, I've observed Diego Lopez spend much of his time off from his full-time job serving at the monastery or other shelter sites. creating a comfortable, hospitable, and safe environment for our guests. In one of my recent overnight shifts, I was with them at the monastery until almost 9 p.m. and was conversing with them the next morning. It's before 7 a.m. Teresa and Diego have dedicated themselves to serving the asylum-seeking community for several years. I support this action before you because the idea that either Teresa or Diego would take any action or make any decision that would cause harm to these children of God is completely contrary to what I have witnessed while working with them in this ministry. I also support this action before you because as a Christian, I believe in redemption and transformation of people and places. The notion that it is not possible to redeem or transform a space, especially one never used for its intended purpose, flies in the face of what I believe as a Christian and preach as a pastor. And I'm looking forward to being part of the transformation that will make this space, this place, the work of caring for God's children, that it will be. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Rachel Sedgwick. Rachel, please come forward. Give us your name for the record. You have 3 minutes to address the Board of Supervisors.
Rachel.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, Board of Supervisors, Mr. Huckleberry. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Rachel Sedgwick. I am a law clerk and an educational consultant at a nonprofit in Nogales in Santa Cruz County. I'm also on the TUSD school board. I'm the board clerk. And I read in the paper an article that explained sort of what was happening here, a plan that had been put in place and that was last minute rearranged because 2 board members decided to go off and talk to the news on their own. I spoke with the superintendent of TUSD and asked him what had happened. And he told me that he and Mr. Huckleberry had spoken some months ago and determined that it was not feasible to use a TUSD school for many reasons. Some of them have been enumerated in the newspaper recently. So when those 2 individuals decided to go off on their own, and in my opinion, when they decided to go off on their own, they sort of derailed the plans that were in place. Now I'm officially undecided on this issue. I definitely support housing these legal residents, these migrants that have a right to be in the United States while they are finding their permanent place with friends or family. However, I do not support the process that led us to this place. And I think that it's important that our boards work together and that all people in this community have a voice. And it's frustrating to see people come up at the call to the audience to share their perspective and see that the county administrator feels that it's only necessary to pay attention to some speakers and not to others. To me, that is also, it's inappropriate. Now, while I recognize that this grant money from the Stone Garden Grant can probably not be used to help homeless people in Pima County, to help alleviate the drug issues or the mental health issues that have existed for at least 25 years. And I view this again as a good thing to house the migrant shelters. I wonder why this board has never tried to provide the civil rights that human beings are due to our residents, to our homeless people, to our veterans, to drug users and the people in this county with health issues. I hope that what you'll learn from this call to the audience is that we are undecided. We need more information in this community, and it's up to the community to decide. So I hope that I hope that this board will actually put this vote off for another moment so that the community can really weigh in and so that you can figure out what it is that you're really doing. Thank you very much.
Okay, our next speaker is going to be Tiara Rainey, followed by Reverend Hannah Adair Bonner and Summer Aguilera. So, Tiara, you're first. Thank you for being here. You have 3 minutes to address the board. Please give us your name for the record.
My name is Tiara Rainey. The reason I'm here today is I created the No Child Jail Shelter campaign. I did that because I love this community. And I was highly disturbed at this plan of putting the shelter in an active juvenile detention facility. While I understand that there are claims that folks can just go and be free, why are we ignoring the fact that we're putting a humanitarian shelter next to caged children? Why are those caged children okay to be forgotten? If we've closed down 2/3 of the juvenile detention facility, why not close the other third of it? You can't repurpose a building that is still incarcerating people. And there are far-reaching consequences for those who've actually had contact with the carceral state, which we understood when we advocated against this in the first place. You're already seeing this in the high cost of food because that kitchen is not accessible because it's an active detention center. You have all sorts of different contractors, law enforcement, and you're talking about vulnerable people of color, right, who are all going to be in a space that is already surveilled. We can do better, Tucson. We can do better, but the community wasn't even given the opportunity to participate in this conversation. I think that's the piece that is really most upsetting about this, is if we had been given more than 2 weeks notice about this plan, if CCS had actually reached out to community stakeholders and directly impacted people, which I have seen very few of those today speaking, people who've actually served time at detention facilities, because those who've had contact with jails and incarceration will be the first to tell you that no matter how many murals you put on a jail cell, that it is oppressive. Why can't we imagine something better, especially for an investment of $1.5 million? That's not sustainable. We're the 5th poorest county of our size in Pima County. And the thing is, I understand that there's this earmarked money from Stone Garden, but if the vast majority of the money is coming out of general funds, which it likely will, why couldn't we repurpose a school with actual green space? Why couldn't we create a hybrid model that actually meets the needs of this struggling and poor community, that helps the homeless, that helps migrant communities, that's accessible to everyone? By moving this shelter to I-10 and Ajo, you are cutting out the community in this process. I appreciate the time to speak about this, and I urge you to vote no on this.
Okay, Reverend Hannah Adair Bonner, thank you for being here. Appreciate your patience, and you have 3 minutes to address the Board of Supervisors after giving your name.
Hello, my name is the Reverend Hannah Adair Bonner. I'm the United Methodist clergy person assigned to the University of Arizona. My offices are housed at the Campus Christian Center. Thank you for taking the time to hear us today. Yesterday, I spent most of the afternoon sitting at the inn, which is the shelter where I spend most of my time. I sat and I watched the families go about their day. I watched a mother prepare food for her daughter. I watched a father walk out the door freely and go up the street to CVS to get a Coca-Cola. I watched all the things, the activities that people do when they feel truly at home and truly free. I watched all the things that we will lose if you move this to a jail. I heard you mention that this is no longer going to be a lease, but an agreement for operations, and it made me think of the agreement for operations forged between Baptist Children and Family Services and the government in order for them to run the operations of the Tornillo tent city in Texas last year. We had such an easy time throwing stones at those who were at a distance, but as is often the case, communities can be far-sighted, seeing so easily when those at a distance have gone astray, and finding things so blurry when they are suddenly close up. As we have seen from the remarks of the Reverend Lonergan, personal relationships complicate a clear view of the issues at hand when things are happening in our own communities. We keep hearing the insistence that this is our only option, that without putting our families into jail cells, they will be dumped on the streets. But we know this is a false narrative that has been intentionally and strategically deployed for some purpose amongst those with power. And I'm sure, Mr. Huckleberry, that you know the reasons why this is being done better than I do. On Palm Sunday, when hundreds of people were dumped on the streets, as has been discussed several times at this point, I was the second person on the scene. I did help Gretchen to lead the efforts to shuttle people to the Campus Christian Center, which is my building. And I did see the Episcopalians begin to prepare food, and the Presbyterians bring out cots, and the religious community work together. And every single one of those people was taken to a local United Methodist church. Not a single one of them was taken to the monastery, which is further proof of the misinformation campaign that has been going on. To approach this conversation in the way that this county, the Catholic Community Services, and Mr. Huckleberry has done, is to erase the work and the willingness of the majority of the religious community in this city and this county that has been doing this work, that are not ignorant of this work as we have been called. In so doing, we have wounded the religious community deeply. And we have wounded our ability to collaborate in order to ensure the outcome desired by the powerful. This is a fight for the soul of Tucson. This is a fight for whether the firm legacy we have established will continue.
Hi, Summer.
Hi.
3 minutes. Give us your name for the record. Thank you for your patience today.
My name is Summer Aguilera. First, we need to recognize that we are on occupied Tohono O'odham land. Second of all, to continue the misinformation. Whew, y'all got me going today. Let's see. You all think that 300 people are being housed in juvenile detention right now, 300 minors every single day, and that's been done for over a decade. There are about 30 to 50 people. Don't take credit for my work. I was part of the campaign to remove the status offenses. I was part of making sure there are only 30 kids there. I also worked there for almost 10 years. The units in question, 700, 800, 900 living units, I worked for almost 5 years. You want to know what I learned in those 5 years? I may have had the opportunity to walk out at my own will, but I still felt trapped. I still have anxiety and PTSD from working in those buildings. I still think about Nicholas, Troy, Ulysses, Angel, Patrick, Mordecai, all of those kids. Those have been units where we have lost children holding Saul in the middle of the night because he was a child prostitute at 15. This is a juvenile detention center. I carried both my sons and almost lost my second one during pregnancy because of the stress in this building. And you want to put people in need? Close the jail. Close it down. We don't need it. Those kids don't need to be there. You all think they're dangerous? It's because we put them in that predicament. Institutionalize. The definition is establish a convention or norm in an organization of culture, place, or keep someone in a residential institution. You will be institutionalizing migrants by using this facility. It doesn't need to happen this way. We have tons of options. One lady stated that we are being creative by using a children's jail, and that we can move mountains. First of all, we're not going to move mountains. Mountains are sacred. And if this is as creative as Tucson gets, we're screwed. I also like to point out the gentleman who brought up that these children are in need of health care. They use that on indigenous people too, for the government to take my grandmother, to do horrible things to indigenous people. The government needs to stay out of that. Don't take these people from us. And I have no qualms with CCS or the religious people asking for all this. My qualms is with you guys using Stone Garden, dirty money, and claiming that it's a humanitarian aid. It's not. It's for your benefits to continue the racist behaviors of your own police and border patrol and everybody in my community, and I want them out. I'm tired of getting pulled over in my own community because my skin's not white enough. And for everybody on social media who have attacked myself, Najima, Carlin, and all the other people of color who stood against this, you need to check yourselves and see who you're really doing the good for. Stop patting yourselves on the back, because we're the ones doing the works in the streets every single day. And stop taking credit for our work.
Okay, our next speaker is going to be Billy Fiedland, to be followed by Reverend Deborah Assis and Mariana Coles Curtis. Please give us your name for the record. You have 3 minutes to address the Board of Supervisors. Thank you for your patience today.
Thank you. You're welcome. I am Billy Fiedland, Director of Outreach and Justice for all United Methodist Churches in Arizona and Southern Nevada, which oversees the efforts of the Inn to America, and the related efforts in Phoenix and also Yuma. I also serve as president of the Arizona Faith Network, representing interfaith communities across the state. It is with gratitude that I recognize the ongoing efforts of good people of faith to find a solution to this problem that we are facing. However, I do not believe that this solution is the best one. I teach leadership in the state's prison system at Perryville Women's Prison, and I have done so for many years. I have experienced facilities of many yards. I have visited juvenile detention centers in Arizona and elsewhere for the past 20 years in my work. In no way can a state institution become a welcoming and humane facility. I am in structures designed for detention all the time. This structure could be safe, but at what cost? No piece of artwork, no poster, no coat of paint, nor rug on the floor can mask any facility designed for the detention of people, no matter how warm the welcome is. Effective renovation would require costs equivalent to the raising of the internal structure. These are vulnerable people who have already been through so much. They will understand that the freedoms that they have risked so much for and that they have journeyed so long to find will still elude them. Living each day in continued uncertainty and fear of the unknown will not be abated. And as with Texas, this solution will simply be another kind of cage with all the associated publicity for Tucson and Arizona. A detention center setting is not the solution, nor does it represent the best of who America, let alone Arizona, can be. We need to continue to be in conversation and to allow the current local shelters, such as the Inn, to do the fine humanitarian work that they have already been doing. Please vote no on this and table until you have further information that will help you make an informed decision. Thank you so much.
Next speaker is Reverend Deborah Assis.
I respectfully pass to the next speaker.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Our next speaker is Mariana Coles Curtis. Thank you for being here. You have 3 minutes to address the Board of Supervisors after giving us your name.
Hi, my name is Mariana Coles Curtis. Thanks for having us here. I'm also here to oppose the plans to move Casa Elitas into the unused wings of Pima County's fully operational child jail. So you all are proposing to use Operation Stone Garden funds, a grant which has been met with widespread community resistance. You all are asking the Department of Homeland Security, the agency which oversees ICE and Border Patrol, agencies who are responsible for the concentration camp conditions in migrant detention centers and holding centers around the country. So you're asking the Department of Homeland Security to fund a nonprofit to house migrant families in an active child jail. Rightly so, there has been a lot of attention on the separation of migrant families and the jailing of migrant youth. We also need to be thinking about the deep injustice of jailing any child, citizen or non-citizen, and considering the ways that Casa Elitas would be implicated in the continuing functioning of Pima County's child jail. That would look like payment for utilities, payment for meals, payment for laundry, and payment for maintenance, all things which would directly aid the survival of a monument to the racist prison industrial complex at its worst, a jail for children. That the Pima County Juvenile Detention Center has empty wings is great news. Clearly, there are other options for places Casa Elitas could move to, but if you all are so set on using the Juvenile Detention Center, why doesn't Pima County let the rest of those kids out of their cages? And then, in conversation with directly impacted folks, you all could talk about what it might look like to tear down the barbed wire and reclaim the building as a shelter whose sole interest is serving migrant families. Only then would it be appropriate to talk about Christian transformation. If Casa Elitas is funded by the Department of Homeland Security, again, the agency responsible for ICE and for Border Patrol, what would keep the shelter from being anything other than an arm of the Department of Homeland Security? This move would be an unprecedented merging of the prison industrial complex and the nonprofit industrial complex in Tucson. So I just want to ask you if that is the cutting edge that you all want to be a part of. Thanks for your time.